I screwed up the name of one of the movies that was made by some of the staff of The Ultimate Hero. I called the movie Robot Apocalypse, but it's actually called Robot Holocaust, which is an even sillier title that I really regret not saying. It was a low-budget post-apocalyptic flick co-produced by the US and Italy in 1986, about a band of survivors in a world devastated by robots that revolted against their human masters. It was later featured in the first season of Mystery Science Theater 3000, where I believe it was the first colorized movie to be featured on the show. Just a little tidbit I wanted to add. Now, back to the retrospective. A lot of changes were made to the 90s episodes in an attempt to modernize the classic Japanese episodes for a 1993 American audience. Some of the changes they made actually benefited the new stories and kind of put some of their aspects above the writings for their 1966 counterpart. In The Demons Once More, Jamila and Abaros are awakened from a capsule that had been buried for millennia. The two duke it out for a bit before Abaros becomes the winner, only to lose to Ultraman a few minutes later. The revised episode tweaked a few bits, such as Abaros being awakened before Jamila, and then letting both monsters square off with Ultraman powered at the end. This was the initial idea for the older Ultraman episode, before it was decided to only have one of the demons fight the titular hero. Kind of makes you wonder if someone at Tsuburaya brought this up to the writer, hoping to recycle a long-lost idea. The monster Gabora is once again depicted as a uranium-eating monster. Rather than spending half the episode luring the monster from civilized regions using uranium on a helicopter as bait, the new version spends a chunk of the episode trying to stop Gabora from decimating a nuclear reactor that could wipe out the entire landscape if the reactor becomes overheated. And as a bonus, Ultraman defeats the monster much more ceremoniously with a beam to the face, as opposed to simply tearing off 2 shards of his face-covering structure. An ending that made absolutely no sense to me. The episode regarded as the saddest episode from the original show was My Home is Earth, in which an American astronaut named Jamila is mutated while stranded on a foreign planet, then returns to Earth and begins wreaking havoc in an attempt to exact his revenge on the scientists who left him to die in space and swept his mission under the rug. He gave a brief glimpse of remorse for the damage he'd caused to his own species, but it mostly didn't go anywhere beyond that. And Ultraman's defeat of the monster is kind of cruel, as he seems to just let Jamila writhe in agony as he slowly dies, rather than simply giving him a more merciful death. For the new episode, the writer upped the ante by giving Jamila, now pronounced Jamra in this version, the ability to appear in human form, but only for brief periods before the alien infestation in his body forces him to manifest into a giant monstrosity that he's gradually losing control over. He tries desperately to see his wife and daughter one more time just to say goodbye to them, knowing his time is very limited. His situation is worsened when a group of government agents kidnap his daughter to draw him out to be captured and used for study. When the time came after the showdown, Jamra, hearing his daughter's pleads, stands down and welcomes Ultraman's specium ray, putting an end to the monster that so cruelly tried to overtake his humanity. For Pestar's episode, we get to see the sea monster attack an oil refinery at night, which I actually thought made his ransack of the area more haunting and memorable, compared to the daytime setting in the original. This time, Pestar attacked the refinery out of instinct, compared to his 1966 attack, which was instigated by the Science Patrol shooting at him when they were supposed to hold off on their direct attacks. We even get to see him fight Ultraman powered, when in the original episode, he fired only one attack at Ultraman before instantly being killed by the hero's spacium ray. There's even a B-plot where Kai meets up with an old friend from his days in flight school, who couldn't be where Kai is at Winter because he was revealed to be colorblind, failing his chances to become a pilot. and then later, he sneaks onto one of the Winter Hawks and ultimately saves Ultraman from Pestar. A lot of these changes were pretty cool for what they offered, but other times, the new scripts and the finished product didn't do enough to fully stand up against its ancestral entry. Some of the new episodes were simply uninteresting, some came off as lazy, while others were just dull and weak when compared to their counterpart. In the lawless Monster Zone, the Science Patrol is dispatched to a remote island to rescue a group of scientists that were trapped and hunted by the monsters, Red King, Chandlar, Magular, and a man-eating tree called Sufflan, while the last remaining scientist is given shelter by a strange creature called Pigmon. Empowered, Winter is dispatched to rescue a crew of documentary filmmakers who are trapped in a canyon in southern Guyana. There's no man-eating Flora, and Magular is replaced by a second Red King, one that, believe it or not, is actually red, as the name would suggest. The head of the film crew is a producer, played by Jeffrey Combs. How in the world did they get him roped into this? Who's the Carl Denham of the crew. He's there to shoot a nature film, and will stop at nothing to get the perfect footage, even at the risk of his crew's safety.
Ow! Is it broken?
No, I think you'll be okay.
Not me, I was talking about the camera.
Oh, relax. He's gonna be all right. Isn't that right, Pete?
Well, at least this camera's all right.
When he discovers Pigmon, who's been revamped into a forest dweller, he has ambitions to take the creature back to the States for media fortune.
I'm gonna put you on TV. You are going to be a huge international star. Huh?
We're millionaires, boys! I'll share it with all of you! Why, in a few months it'll be up in lights on Broadway!
But at the end of the episode, he has a sudden change of heart, for reasons that are never explained, deciding not to tell his executives anything about Pigmon, abandoning his opportunity to turn a profit. What happened to him that made him suddenly change his motives and demeanor? Did being rescued by Winter and Ultraman rejuvenate his spirit or something? Don't know, never will know. Though it was admittedly pretty neat to watch Powered fight Aberos and Vanilla at once, the idea fell flat on its feet pretty quickly. Long before Ultraman shows up, Aberos kills Vanilla by spraying him with an acid slime, akin to the original episode. A few minutes later, Vanilla unexpectedly resurrects, without any explanation as to how or why this happened. Later, after the two demons are destroyed by Ultraman's laser, Vanilla never revives again, even though he was able to do it when he was liquefied by Aberos' acid. The characters never once stopped to question if Vanilla will return again, or even if Aberos could also revive himself from the dead. Then there's episode 4, where Telesdon is marching around a city, wrecking and demolishing everything he touches. And by demolishing everything he touches, I mean random explosions just spontaneously erupt on or near the buildings around him, without him ever so much as coming in contact with any of these buildings. And this bizarre effect is never called into question by anyone, nor is it ever explained by anyone. I can almost guess that this episode was directed by Michael Bay. Oh wait, that probably isn't what happened, because the budget and schedule for this series were so constrained that they could only hire one director for the shoot of the entire series.
Huh?
Originally, the idea was that the episodes would be helmed by a variety of different directors to handle the 13 episodes. Unfortunately, the limited budget made that impossible, and so each episode was directed by King Wilder, just like how every episode of Ultraman Great was directed by Andrew Prowse. It's not necessarily a bad thing for every episode of a short TV show to be made by the same director, but one of the most intriguing aspects of any show is the unique visual artistry brought to the screen by an artist with his own skill and style. The older Ultraman shows from the 60s and 70s reused a director only for a select number of episodes, letting most of the stories leave the audience with a unique experience after their viewing. Some episodes were straightforward, some had a strong sense of humor, while others managed to be dramatic and scary. For Ultraman Powered, none of the 13 stories feel very different from each other in regards to tone and execution, with the only major change taking the form of a different monster the characters have to tangle with in each episode. The tone is always the same, the direction is always the same, so if you wanted to pick a favorite or least favorite episode, it'd be a little hard to do so, because all the episodes have virtually the same pros and cons that aren't too tricky to pick out anyway. And it wasn't just the one and only director that was a problem with the production. The studio space was limited, the storage space was poor, and because of the limited budget and tight schedule they had to work with, the crew, among other things, had to find ways to complete the filming of a single scene as fast as they could. You see, to conserve as much time as possible, they often gave multiple jobs to multiple crew members. If someone got hired to be a director or something else, he might also have to be an actor, too. Assuming they knew who to hire to do which job on whatever day they were supposed to come in for work, because they always got their crew schedules confused. Many of them had to do odd jobs like drive their props to the next shooting location, or even work as an overnight security guard for the warehouse, because they couldn't afford to hire a real one.
Pow! You're dead meat.
Some of the crew even used the offices of Major Havoc as a place to sleep at night. And then they had to worry about the heat stress while filming in the interior shots. Some of the sets, like the command center and the Hawks, which are the fighter jets used by the winter team, would greatly and quickly attract high-heated temperatures, making it hard to film in them for long periods of time. Sometimes, the command center set reached up to 110 degrees Fahrenheit, which made the filming of these scenes almost unbearable. Not that the rest of the production was any better, need I remind anyone.
Kai, where were you?
I was just out getting some fresh air. You know how stuffy it gets in here, especially when you kept out of the action.
I can almost picture the look on King Wilder's face on the very first day of principal photography, when he suddenly learned that about 60% of the shots he planned to shoot for every single scene had to be removed in order to meet their schedule. As a result, the scenes didn't turn out as detailed or as exciting as he'd hoped, as photography for each scene just became, alright, master shot, close up, okay, let's move on. Instead of shooting perhaps 2 pages of the script a day, they ended up having to film upwards of around 12 to 14 pages a day, including scenes for completely different episodes, and they were forced to work with this schedule on every single day of filming. They didn't even have the time to work on the performances of the actors, which was yet another downfall for the series.
But Captain, I don't know anything about satellite coordinates. I'm more qualified to drive the rover.
It's a monster! Everybody get out of here! Run! Quick, run!
We're paying you extra to watch the pipeline, not to sit around.
Hey, the monster's clear out in the bay. It'll never come this far inland.
Let go of me! You're lying! You don't know where my dad is!
Oh, and there's another reason why the fighting choreography sucks so much. The low budget and the cheap suits weren't the only excuses why Ultraman and the monsters barely put up an exciting challenge with each other. When the show was set to be aired in the US, there were certain guidelines it had to follow in order to meet the American TV censorship laws, which included the amount of danger and action they could put into a live-action show like this. If they wanted a for all ages content rating, nothing too graphic or violent was to be used. This meant that the show had to stray even farther away from the classic entries we know and love. These censorship guidelines meant no slicing and dicing of kaijus, no permanent injuries, and no strong punches or kicks were allowed. Instead, we got to endure the majesty of light grappling, pushing, and shoving. This also meant that the scripts, which had already gone through multiple rewrites, had to be changed yet again to stay within the ratings protocols. Not that it really mattered in the end, considering the show never even made its way to American airwaves. With all this insanity surrounding the production, you're probably wondering where Tsuburaya was hanging out in the meantime. Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, because of their contract for the show, Tsuburaya couldn't get involved any further than the small steps they gave for the American production at the beginning, such as providing the funding, hiring the film crew, and selecting the American production studio. They could check in from time to time to ensure things were going on the right track, but aside from that, they couldn't personally get on the sets or involve themselves in any way. The American staff languished about Tsuburaya's lack of further assistance with the show's making, which they knew could have gone so much smoother had it been made with Tsuburaya's input, given their long experience in the field.
Carbon units are needed for reconfiguration. Do not try to stop us.
What did that piece of static just call us?